You're on the Fresh FM, the Deadline Report with Ben Vidgen Investigates. I'm today talking about the second part of a series I began last show, which is I call my ABCs: Authenticate, Backed Up, and Credibility. This is a show which I've launched because I've been very frustrated with this whole thing concept about fake news. This idea that we all have to be on the lookout for fake news. In my personal opinion, I actually think I really hate that word. I hate that word as much as I hate conspiracy theory. It's a term that you can throw out when you don't actually have an argument. More often than not, news is news, and news. The question is whether or not news follows set methodology. The information that you get follows a certain criteria, which, as I explained in the last show, can be authenticated. And when I explain what authenticated was, it means is that information actually documented? Can the information be documented? Is it not a case of Fred just down at the pub telling you that he saw an alien last night, so you must believe him? Or did Fred come in and he show you an alien ray gun and then obliterate Bob down at the bar? That would be a very good way of authenticating the information. Probably would also have Fred locked up, but you would know that he actually been speaking to aliens. However, more importantly, that's not probably likely to happen. So more often than not, even when you get information that is documented, that is to say that it's not just something you read on the internet, on Facebook, that said, "Oh my God, they're coming to eat our babies." But the fact that information is actually backed up by numerous sources. I explained last week's show that when I actually do this, I'll lead with a lead source. I don't mind if that source is an unnamed source. But what I will also turn around and do is I will then turn around and make sure that I have information which can document that, and I have multiple sources to document it. So, what I try to do is I make sure that my sources of information that verify it come from independent sources, so they're not all coming from the same department of we want to sell you crap, but that they might be, say for example, I might get a source, as I did when I was doing my book about weapons coming into New Zealand and ending up in the hands of right-wing groups back in the 1990s, which I was told was all a conspiracy theory, and that wasn't actually happening. Well, look what's happening now. What I turned around and did was I got my lead sources, and I turned around and I went to academic sources who said this was consistent with their information. I then went to military sources, who all of these were sources that were named in my book. So Greg Newbold from Sociology Department of Canterbury University, Les G, who had worked in military intelligence, and then I turned around and I went to New Zealand Customs Intelligence, Tony Spillane and John Anderson, who also said that my information was consistent with what they were receiving. And then finally I turned around and I interviewed different police officers, such as people like Daryl Brazier, who also said that information was consistent with what they were receiving. So I backed up my information. Of course, what would have been better is if I had been able to come along with a picture of me holding a AK-47, which I was actually given the opportunity to do, but I decided that going for a ride into the middle of a forest was probably not. My sense of self-preservation kicked in, and I went, no, I think I've got enough to actually present my argument. And of course, historical events have come along since then and actually largely very much more vindicated me in ways that being right is actually one of the, in this job, it's not something that you actually, you want it, but in some cases you don't really want it. So yeah, you have your information that it's authenticated and your information is backed up, and so when you're looking at the situation, you then get into the issue of, are your sources credible sources? And that's in some ways sometimes the more difficult one of this particular argument in this world, when we've got information coming at us from all sorts of directions to do. We had this thing we often turn around, people saying, tell the truth. I know the truth. The truth is out there. All done in capital letters, and I don't believe in the truth. I believe that we all have different perceptions of the truth, and it's a bit like that movie, The Dead Poets Society, where Robin Williams gets the young lads to stand up on the table and he says, look, once you go from sitting down to standing up, your perception of the world changes. And I think that's for me how truth actually operates. But what you can try and do is make sure that your information is accurate, so that when people are looking at you, they may not necessarily have the same truth as you, but they know that they can rely on you to present information that is actually accurate, and therefore that knowledge presents you with a credibility. course, a lot of the situation of the information is that issue of context, and that I talked in the first show about the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, where the various bureaucrats and military people wanting to sell this war presented information that was documented. It did actually happen. There were recordings of them listening to Iraqi soldiers, but the context of that information was that the information had been cut and pasted so that it presented to the people that they were trying to sell the story to that this is what was actually going on. That obviously, of course, was politicians who sold this, but so were corporate media who chose to go along with it. And in some ways, that's probably more unforgivable because these are people that are actually trained in the art of dealing with information, discerning information. And so when you have people like that are normally, sources like the Washington Post or the BBC, which we've all been grown up to believe that these are professional, providers of news. They're kind of doing us a disservice by actually, they have the tools to know all these tricks. So when they go on about fake news, it's, it frustrates me because there are plenty of examples out there which shows that those professional standards of making sure that information is presented in context not only doesn't always actually happen, but it's increasingly not happening. And this is, I guess, in partly because, when you actually consider a lot of information today, it seems like it comes from us anyway, but when it comes to corporate media, we are looking at a corporate media world which has been owned by few and few people who have more and more control of that information, and are able to use that information and the tools at their hands to really do a lot of damage in terms of shaping us into what our belief systems actually are. This is again the situation when we turn around, and I'm going to try and stay off examples per se. Let's cut to the chase. Let's take someone like Bill Gates, and that we hear a lot of information out there today by organisations that are scientific, they're academic, or they're media-based. So these are professional sources that you feel that you'll be encouraged to trust. But when you turn around and you start to look at the large amounts of money that people like Bill Gates are actually spending into making sure that their version of the narrative being sold, you then have an issue of the fact that while you might be having a scientific person turning around and coming out and telling you, oh, this is what's going on, when you turn around and look at where their funding comes from, it dents their credibility because there is an agenda that has come along and shaping what they are actually presenting. For me, when I turn around and I look at this information, and I'm weighing these things up, it's like, I'll get somebody like John Pelcher, who is a man that is not without a bias. He is, by his definition, self-definition, a socialist. He has grown up in a particular perception of the world, so he has his version of the truth. But, he's also been around for 30 or 40 years, won several, major awards, which are, peer review amongst his own peers, has been recognised as a person that, always adheres to these standards of information. So I will largely take his information with a lot more less of a pinch of salt than, say, somebody that pops up on a blog that we know is receiving money from a political party. Cameron Slater is actually a very good example of that. And so we've gone into cases where he's faced defamation cases where that bias of him actually reporting news based upon a money flow has been established. So someone like Cameron Slater, I don't deem a very credible source. Ultimately, though, of course, at the end of the day, you also have to take into account that may be my own perception, but if Cameron Slater, for example, presents a story and he's able to show that his information is actually it's authenticated, it's been documented, that he's using multiple sources, those sources that are again documented, that they're coming from numerous different sources, and that those sources in turn verify, then you also have to take into account that, well, he may have a bias, but sometimes black is black and white is actually white. I turned around once I saw recently on the Beirut bombing material put up by Bellingcat, which is an organisation that has affiliations with different Western intelligence services. So if they were giving an opinion-based flow of information, I might be like, I'm not so sure. But because they were actually able to show me physical footage and that I was able to cross-reference that information against other sources with separate perceptions of the truth, I actually felt quite comfortable in that particular case, and of course I stated this is such and such, this is what their bias actually is. And again, sort of quite often I might turn around and I might watch RTT television, which to a certain point I would have once said was a very reliable news source. I'm not so comfortable these days until when I was speaking about Russia, because it is a state-affiliated organization, I was like, I'm trying to think of an American example which counteracts that one, and I'm not going to name any of them because they're bad examples, but it is the issue of the credibility of your source. What are the biases that come with that particular flow of information? The issue, of course, that we're going to take a little bit of a break right now. I think we're just on Fresh FM. We're going to go into. I'm going to pick short memory. This is by Midnight Oil. Great band. And I'm kind of picking it today because, of course, when we're looking at the issue of information, in context, it's, quite often I turn around and see things will happen today, and it's like the journalists have actually completely forgotten about all the examples that exist beforehand, and they're writing only from now. And I think, any information you do, or any research you do, you've always got to cross-reference against about what happened beforehand. So this is a Midnight Oil short memory. You're on the Fresh FM show, or you're on Fresh FM with Ben Vidgen, the Deadline Reports, and I'll see you shortly. And this is Ben Vidgen on Fresh FM, the Deadline Report. Ben Vidgen Investigates. I'm doing a show today which is part of the second part show on what I'm calling ABC, Authenticate, Backed Up, and Credibility. First show we looked at the issues of whether the information is authenticated, that means it's documented, and whether it's got multiple sources, it's backed up. Today I'm looking at the issue of whether the information is credible. So when you're looking at your information, you've got your multiple sources, you've got your sources documented. You then now have to work out whether or not that source is actually credible. And I guess the first part of that equation works on, in my mind, I always draw a little graph. And that graph, has on one axis I'll have the quantity of information, and then on the other level I will have the quality of that information. So the quantity is quite easy enough to explain. It means, is my information backed up? Do I have numerous sources? Is this Fred down at the pub telling me something, or am I looking at something which I'm seeing with my own eyes, and I'm witnessing it with 70,000 other people have all seen the same thing? That would be a really good quality of knowing that what I'm seeing is true. And there are even exceptions there when you start to bring, but let's not go too far down that particular rabbit hole. So you've got your information. It's got lots of it's got lots of quantity. The question is, what is the quality of that information? Now, I'll give you an example. Try and break it down, because it's kind of, credibility is the tricky one. During 9/11, the Twin Towers attack, one of the things I did before I kind of tried to get too much into writing and reporting on that particular topic, was I first of all went down to the Wellington Library in Wellington. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to get all of the newspapers out there that were available, so that I could cross-reference them against what was being said on the internet, to make sure that if someone said, the Washington Post actually said this, that's what the Washington Post said. And because, of course, then if I could find that the person I was reading was actually accurately quoting the hardline sources of information, they weren't putting out a presented information out of context, then I'd obviously give that particular report more credence than in cases, I think it was The Other Side of Deception by Victor of Trotsky, who when I was writing State Secrets and I was looking at a lot of the arms that were coming into New Zealand, he made reference to that in his books. I didn't find him a very credible source, because when I went in and I actually went and got those hard articles that he was quoting in his appendix and his footnoting, what I found quite often the time was that actually that information, he might have got the title right and he might have got the journalist right, but he was actually misquoting, or that those journalists actually hadn't said that at all. So, I didn't deem Victor or Trotsky, the other side of deception, to be a very credible source at all. In the case of 9/11, it was quite interesting, because when I went down to the library to actually cross-reference this material, what I was quite surprised to find out was that all the American newspapers had vanished from the Wellington Library. And when I turned around and went to the front desk and said, "Well, I'd like to get these newspapers out so I can make sure that my information is accurate," they said, "Oh, well, we get that information from all those newspapers from the US Embassy, and they're now not doing that anymore." And I found that quite amazing. It was sort of quite interesting, because again, during um, the attack in Christchurch, I again went to do this. I was on a flight to Christchurch to go down there and be on the ground and actually not see information from what I was seeing on the screen, but I wanted to see it firsthand. I wanted to make sure that, that when people describe something, that it was actually how it was being described. And of course, for me, this would have been a very easy thing to do, because I've been brought up in Christchurch. I knew the area literally like the back of my hand. So I knew what to look for, and of course I also had the advantage that that when I spoke to somebody inside the mosque, especially in the Linwood case, I had people outside of the mosque that had worked with these people, or knew them directly, and were able to verify that they'd been there for that long. And so it wasn't just a case of taking someone and accepting them at the word. I was able to actually vet that information, which of course all strengthened and endorsed the credibility of what people were telling me, and made me feel much more comfortable knowing that I was reliably actually giving people good information. So with dealing with the credibility of sources, so you've got that whole issue of making sure that what you read on the internet is actually accurate by cross-referencing it, and ideally being able to get the actual hard physical, whether it's a book or a newspaper or whatever, what a quote in your hands is always going to be the best way to do it. Um, what we all, of course, we turn around and we see things online. We see YouTube videos, and again, there's a good example of a missile hitting the port in Beirut. Lots of people went on about this. Oh my God! See, this missile that's been attacked. There's living proof that Mossad is attacked. Well, we later found out. I mean, it was an interesting one for me, because I'm not au fait when it comes to CGI or technical, technology. So I lack the expertise to actually say, well, actually, for myself, and that's what I really want is to know always firsthand that the information is reliable or not. So I had to rely on other people. I, however, was able to cross-reference what they said when they turned around and said, well, no, this has actually been, doctored, and this is why, and a lot of that technical stuff, to be honest, went over my head. But what I was able to do was I was able to cross-reference that technical information from another source of expertise, in terms of I may not have been able to verify the missile attack, but I knew enough about explosives to be able to turn around and say, well, no, the first issue that's wrong with the idea that a missile hit the port was that you can see that the port's already on fire. So it doesn't make any sense hitting a building that is going to blow up anyway. And we were able to know, I was able to know that there were chemicals in that building by, basically the first thing was, they say, oh, there's chemicals in the building. Well, so says you. I was able to go out there and I was able to get photographs that showed that chemicals were in that building. Step one was that it took me a while, but I was able to then turn around and get names to the people that took those photographs, and then do background checks and find out why they were there and verify that information. Step two was I was able to then turn around and find information that occurred way before the event to again confirm that that chemical was there. So while I didn't necessarily have the technical abilities to match against the technical claims that were debunking that it wasn't a missile, I had an alternative source which was able to verify that, so the credibility of my sources were verified. So what I'm basically talking about there is the fact that, okay, you're reading stuff online, you want to make sure it's accurate. So the first step is actually cross-reference it against other material, but then of course that's what you call secondary information. You're not there directly, so it's not the same thing as being there, which is always going to be the best, best way of verifying anything, and the most credible way. Yeah, I know this happened because I was there. So you're dealing with secondary sources. You're dealing with somebody told you, and you're now having to rely on their information. And if they do that, you want to make sure that what they're saying is true, because you've actually already ascertained what their bias and their agendas actually are. But they're also able to present physical information of that material. And of course, the more quality sources of that present physical evidence, the greater the credibility of that information is going to be. And if you're able to see a situation where, okay, you're reading stuff online, but now you can see images, so you've got a second flow of information, you've got visual confirmation in terms of not just informational flow of confirmation. That's great. Then of course, if you can get physical information, so let's say theoretically, oh my God, this building blew up and it was attacked by a nuclear bomb. If you're able to actually get hold of the rocks after the event, you may not be there directly, but you've got the rocks and you can see the rocks are glowing in the dark. Probably a good sign that your physical evidence is reliable. And again, it's always just going back to, and I hammer this home again, try and get as many sources of information from as many independent sources, and that will actually just verify and allow you to cross-reference, and also, more importantly, put your information in context so that you know that the information absolutely is how it's being presented. I'm I think we're just going to carry on. We've given you one song today, and that's all you're going to get. Tough luck. We're on this very important issue of making sure that your information that you're getting is absolutely, great. And what I'm talking about is, it's not good enough to go out and collect information, because we're all reasonably smart people. We can do this. We can get on Uncle YouTube and Auntie Google all the way around. But you need to now make sure you need to learn the art of discerning your information, so that you know that your information is actually not just a case of you picking the cherries to get the facts that fit your chosen belief system or your chosen dogma. And this takes hard work. You really have to be quite aware that you've got a methodology, and you need to be ticking off your methodology. And if you do that and you follow the steps and you don't cut corners, then you'll know that your information is about as accurate as you possibly can do. Because of course the issue is about when it gets to the issue of credibility all the time, is it's about looking at the agenda. So when we look, for example, at the moment, I saw a TV documentary recently, and was talking about what listening to people that are professional researchers. You must do this, and you can't just listen to people on the internet and Facebook, because they're not the experts, and you listen to the authorities because they know best. And they brought out Jane Kelsey as an example of this to explain about the need for the question was, what is research? Now, Jane Kelsey is, in my opinion, when it comes to the issues of the legality and the treaty of Waitangi, when it comes to applying that to the TPA, is undoubtedly an expert, and I wouldn't even claim to, on those levels, to even hold any power near her, because she just knows her subject so well and is also very good at explaining it. And she's able to provide reference material to back that actually up. The issue comes down to the fact that example where they dragged out Jane Kelsey, was like, well, that's also true of the TPA, because that's exactly what was actually happening during the TPPA, was that people would turn around and saying, oh, don't listen to Jane Kelsey, and these people don't know that they're not business people, and they don't have all the facts. Well, of course we didn't have all the facts, because they kept a lot of that documentation secret from the public. But when I was faced with the option of, here we have expert A, Jane Kelsey, here we have expert B, which is the people like, God, my brain gone blank, the New Zealand government, their Ministry of Foreign Affairs trade delegate, who was often presented actually out there to provide the information. Well, they're both experts, and they both know the subject matter, so who do I believe? Who is the more credible source? Well, Jane Kelsey's doing that because she is a concerned citizen, and she doesn't want her country to be actually hurt, and more importantly, wasn't getting paid to say that information, and she had no agenda other than public welfare, as demonstrated by a long and very dedicated career, a career which is respected by her fellow academics. In the case of the New Zealand government, the person that was being sent to do this well, that was his job. His job was to sell an agenda, and of course, that agenda was being pushed and promoted by professional lobbyists, corporate lobbyists that very much wanted it for their agenda, which was making money. So, versus the concerned citizen versus the person that's there because they're trying to actually make money for their backers, it doesn't become much of a no-brainer. And I think that again is, when we look at today with things like the COVID-19, a very, very, very complicated subject. We all forget this only happened a year, and there is a tendency when events happen that we all instantaneously turn into experts. But it's going to take a long time to discern the realities of COVID-19. So I'm not today trying to point you in a theory one way or the other, but I'm making the point that when I'm looking at the information and I have people say, no, don't trust them, that's all fake news. I'm going, well, yeah, but what's your agenda and who are you in bed with? And when I look at other people that are following the flows of information, following those rules that I tell you, so that they are authenticating, they're documenting the information, they're backing it up, they present me as being people that actually have more credibility. So I will listen to alternative ideas. I will consider other perspectives than just the official narrative. I think it's a very dangerous, slippery road when we turn around and think, oh no, we only listen to the government. I hate to think that that's where we're going to end up. But if we don't realise the fact, become more discerning in our own information ability to assess information, and we don't become more self-educational of each other about how we can make sure our information is accurate, is backed up, and is credible, that's where we're going to be. You're listening to Ben Vidgen on the Deadline Report. Ben Vidgen Investigates. You can listen to me on Fresh FM on Sunday nights or Sunday afternoons at 1 p.m. or Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. every second week. You can come to my website, postmanproductions.com. There's a lovely little donation box, so if you want to fund this show, please drop a koha in the box. Or alternatively, you can view me on the YouTube channels. This is Ben Vidgen, Deadline Report, Fresh FM. Have a great week.